It's an interesting time. It's a lot of fun right now. I mean, when you have the House, Senate, and White House, you dream for these moments. You raise a lot of money and run around the country, helping candidates get elected for these moments. They don't happen by accident. We started the year with, well, it was a bigger majority, and then President Trump pulled a few people into his administration, and lo and behold, we had a two-seat majority when we started the conference in full. And and obviously we had a very ambitious agenda. We had a lot of things we wanted to do. The president had a lot of things he ran on, and we were pretty much aligned. I mean, the things that he ran on were very much the same things that a lot of our members ran on. And then you start the process of actually getting the details worked out. Hey, we're all for border security. We want more energy production. We want to lower inflation and interest rates. And then you get in a room, and it's not Republicans yelling at Democrats. It's Republicans yelling at Republicans. How do we lower interest rates? How do we reform Medicaid? So non-controversial. And of course, all Republicans think alike, vote alike, want the same things. And so, what we started doing early off, and I did this when I was whip, the last time in 2017 when we had what we called the trifecta, the full alignment of the House, Senate, and White House like we do now. And I just found it makes a lot more sense to not have all these little silos of members and, hey, all the hardcore Freedom Caucus guys want to meet with you, and then the moderates want to meet with you, and let's go talk to RSC. Because each group, it's like preaching to the choir. Okay, I get where you're all coming from, but do you know there's at least 40 other members in this conference that think 180 degrees different than you? And of course, nobody trusts anything. Like, okay, no, I don't believe that. Why would anybody else think that? So I started just getting everybody in a room, cross sections. We can't get 220 people in a room, but we would get about 20 people in a room. And in my conference room, it's not like a disco ball drops down and we're drinking cocktails. I mean, it's a lot of yelling and a lot of screaming. But ultimately, at the end of a 2-hour-long session, it's people coming together and respecting the differences once they see colleagues on different sides of the table representing different views, representing different districts, representing different ideologies, but all wanting the same thing. How can you all walk into the room wanting the same thing and wanting to accomplish it completely differently? And so our challenge in leadership is, how do you blend that? How do you get that Freedom Caucus member and that member from a 50-50 moderate district who had $40 million thrown against him and he barely won by half a point, all to come to the same conclusion on the budget, on reconciliation. And it's a work in progress. We are in the middle of this great experiment, and it's going well, but every day is a challenge. Today will be another challenge. We are working through the Medicaid side of things, SALT, an issue that only applies to a couple of members in our conference. It doesn't apply to anybody in the Senate because there is not a single Republican senator from a SALT state, but they recognize, and I've talked to a number of them, that we've got to resolve this in the House because it applies to about 15 of our members passionately. They want to get this fixed. President Trump says, we're going to fix SALT. Again, like, hey, we're going to fix SALT. Well, what does that mean? We've had meetings after meetings after meetings, a little bit of yelling and some violent language and all that stuff. And at the end of the meeting, we get a little bit closer, but we're not fully there yet. But we surely have a good understanding of what it means. But for some people, that fix means, hey, give me another $500 billion in SALT deductions, and we just can't do that. And so you've got to balance the two because ultimately you're raising money, you're achieving savings, you're having cuts, whatever you want to call them, all to ultimately get smarter tax policy to ensure nobody has a tax increase. That's where we start. And then there are additional things we want to do. We want to have pro-growth tax policy. How do you do that? There's a lot of things we can do. The president ran on some very specific things. I don't know if you heard this, but President Trump said he wants to get rid of tax on tips. We are going to get rid of tax on tips. It has a cost, and we're putting that together. Some of the other items he talked about, we're putting that together too. And then ultimately, we're going to have one big, beautiful bill. It's going to be a lot bigger, by the way, than what we did in 2017. And I think what we did in 2017 was historic. I think anybody that looks at the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and what it did to get economic growth, to bring jobs back to America, to bring great companies. We were losing once a month. You all know them. Some might be in this room. Great American companies that just left America because we had a 35% uncompetitive tax rate. World average was 23. We're at 35. And we brought the rate down to 21. We figured out how to do it. But only 2 committees were involved in that process in 2017, Ways and Means and Natural Resources. We did some energy production to pay for and offset that. The tax code was opened up. We closed a lot of loopholes, and we covered the cost of going down to 21%, effective immediately. Well, today, we're not using just 2 committees in reconciliation. There are 11 committees involved. Much broader policy. We're going into energy production again, but we're also going into border security. You know, we're funding the wall. We're funding technology for our border agents. We're doing debt ceiling increase in this bill. 2-year debt ceiling increase taken off the table so that President Trump doesn't have to go negotiate with Chuck Schumer, who does not want to negotiate with us at all after what happened on the CR. And, you know, AOC is beating him in polls in New York State. God help the people in New York. Can't wait to see that primary happen. But in the meantime, you know, we are putting all that together. Defense. We're actually addressing so many of the deficiencies where we've fallen behind in our nation's defense. Financial Services Committee's involved in this too. You know, so agriculture, you know, putting work requirements in place on a lot of the programs that you go back to the Clinton era work requirements that were incredibly popular with the country. They've been all watered down and pretty much eviscerated over the last 30 years. And we're restoring so many of those too, which is good for the economy, by the way. If somebody's fully able-bodied and they're sitting at home playing video games and you're paying them $35,000, $40,000 a year not to work, that is bad for the country. It's bad for them, by the way, but it's bad for the country and the economy, and it drains resources that we just don't have when we're running $1.8 trillion deficits. We're going to fix that in this bill too. So 8 of the 11 committees have already finished all their work, and we have 3 remaining, and we're working on the final details of what those committees will achieve next week. And it is going to happen next week. We're keeping a very aggressive time frame. We want this bill signed by President Trump in June. You know, Scott Bessent says, I need the bill by July 4th for debt ceiling. They might extend that out a little bit further this week, but that's not the point. We want the economic growth, the economic benefits. We want those families who have been struggling for the last 4 years to finally start getting the economic impacts in their paychecks, more money in your paychecks from economic growth. More money in your paychecks when you go to the grocery store and you pay less at the grocery store, 20% less or more. That's real money in your pocket. For those waiters and waitresses that won't be paying taxes on tips, that's cash in their pockets. Or the idea that you have to worry about being a tax cheat and some IRS agent's going to come after you because you didn't account for all of your taxes on tips. Those are the kind of things that we want to get happening quickly, not in December like we did in 2017, but by summer so that that real economic impact can start hitting quickly. I think you're going to start seeing some tariff deals cut with other countries. You get really good trade deals cut with other countries. That removes a lot of uncertainty you're seeing in the markets. But then we lock in a tax code, not just for another 10 years, but permanence on these tax rates that expire. I think it's going to bring the kind of economic growth we have not seen in a long time, definitely since COVID. And that's really what we're focused on. So a lot of work to do. A lot of work has gone into it. We've been putting work for about a year into this. It didn't just start in November when we won the elections or January when we all got sworn in. We've been working on this with our committees for about a year now, and you're going to see the culmination of that next week. But the work still goes on, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but this is why you run. This is why you want to go get this country back on track, and you know, you sacrifice a lot of things to do it. Here we're at the precipice of getting big things done. And I can tell you, the members I serve with, from the most swing district to the most conservative district, all came here to do big things, and we're about to do it.